All right. Shalom. It's March 31st, 2025. Parshat Vayikra. We are starting a new book, the new book, Vayikra, third book of the Torah. The book that is situated right after the completion of the Mishkan, and doesn't move anywhere. We don't have any movement in this book. That itself is a subject of uh, another kind of class. Uh, the book deals with, at the beginning, the sacrifices, the rituals relating to the sanctuary. The book concentrates in the middle with the laws of holiness and concludes with provisions and blessings, curses, etc. The things that happen to Israel if they are to accept or reject these these laws. And you know, uh, there's always a sense of abruptness when we leave the book of Shemot and enter the book of Vayikra, because we are used to uh, a kind of narrative, a text that tells us stories, a text that draws us in its poetics, a text that has within it the questions of character, motivation, questions of theme, big theological questions. I admit that for a modern reader, the the sketches of the different sacrifices, the menu, as it were, of the sacrifice is very difficult. We've talked about some of this in detail in previous years, um, and what these things mean, what they represent. That there's an emotional palette to the sacrifices. Um, there are certain things that are involved in the sacrifices. We explored at one point, the idea of placing one's hand, the indexing, the the blood, etc. These are various facets of sacrifice that are quite foreign to us and make this material very difficult to handle, especially since we don't worship God in that way. I've always maintained that uh, while we don't worship God through the using sacrifices and animals, the idea of sacrifice is really not far from human behavior. Uh, Human cultures and civilizations do use the term and have this really at the core of their identities. We certainly can view war as a situation of sacrifice. That's the language that's used with war. And soldiers who fall in battle are as if, as it were, sacrificial, so that the people, they've given themselves as the ultimate sacrifice so that the rest of the people can survive. And so this is a language that is really present for us, despite the fact that we do not have the ritual vocabulary for it in the way that we had in antiquity prior to the destruction of the temple. I see Marlene has her hand up, so go ahead.
Well, then why in our daily prayers do we say Bimhei Rabbi Yamenu, that we should go back to this building of the temple and maybe doing this big barbecue when we're not farmers?
No, I think it's a great question, and it's a great religious question in terms of what constitutes, religious normativity, and what are we saying? What do we mean by this? What kinds of things we're trying to say? Whether or not we're saying this with total honesty, or whether what we should understand this as we're saying this because this was being said, because this was being said, or we apply or we reinterpret this and say, perhaps when we pray for the rebuilding of the temple, we are praying for a reconstitution of the people that will understand that sacrifice is no longer necessary, that they will call upon God as one God. That is certainly a kind of reinterpretation that doesn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It doesn't throw the prayer out. In other words, I can, as someone who says these words, I can say, uh, I can imagine not returning to sacrificial religion, but I can imagine the value of pilgrimage and gathering and other forms of religious expression, uh, such as study and such as, the celebration and feasting that don't involve this kind of worship, and which the this becomes an ideal that will radiate uh, uh, peace to the world. I don't have an issue, with that, and I think that these prayers can certainly be reinterpreted, as all prayers have been reinterpreted throughout time, in different eras. Go ahead, Nanette. Make your
Okay.
unmute.
So personally, as a vegan, I don't really have a problem with this animal sacrifice because you've always said, Rabbi, use your imagination, your biblical I don't know, whatever you said with the imagination. So is it possible that, this happens, of course, in biblical times, but currently, in current times, if we were going to do sacrifices, I mean, what's important to us? Time? I mean, if we were
Well,
going to sacrifice currently, there's got to be something other than animals.
well, that's where I think it will go, if it gets to that. Look, I think that if it should ever come to pass that the temple is restored, and we have this debate about worship in a restored temple, and there are, obviously conservative forces within every religious structure that will want to reinstate sacrifice. I mean, there's a whole institute and several people, lots and lots of people who study these texts and study them to the point that they want to do this. I think that will create a tremendous rupture in the Jewish people, which is one good reason why we say these prayers in the hope that it will be a messianic world, so that these problems will be solved already. Uh, I don't want to be let off the hook for this, but I remember. I give you one little anecdote. Since this happened in rabbinical school, and I remember to this day because it was the reaction was not done, nicely, I should say, tactfully. I remember, we had a shalashudis or some kind of gathering, and I was asked to lead a song. So I chose, because it's a lovely fast song, Yibane, 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 Amig, da, 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 which is a Karlbach song, Let the Temple Be Rebuilt. And so one of the professors around the table kind of really, gave a slap down to me for singing that song. Like it was, well, I'm not sure I want the temple to be rebuilt because of all the problems that it would unleash a civil war for people, and because they would be fighting about how exactly we would worship, and it's just fine that we don't have it. And point, yes, okay. On the other hand, that's not that the song is about, and it's kind of silly, and it was an untactful kind of comment that I took umbrage with, and still I'm slightly offended by to this day. You know, it had no awareness of anything in the context. You know, here's a kid that wants to just sing a song, and you're saying that the song is a stupid song. Well, thank you very much. Okay, but you know, this is a conversation that I often have with my colleagues on our Parsha talk, and not that we all want to go back to the sacrificial religion, but we all sense the power that it had in antiquity. And here, this is really important that these structures existed precisely, as we said just prior to talking here, because they had such organizational power, and they were able to captivate people's imagination. You know, I guess I should just show this, you know, a few frames of this video before I go into the text that I wanted to. I mean, I think you'll only be able to handle maybe 30 seconds of this. So I'm just going to put it up for a second because I went, you know, there are lots and lots of tools for studying, and this is in Hebrew, and this is a some yeshiva, some school that is basically taking you and showing you, you know, a video of how things were done. So this is the ritual of cutting up an animal according to chapter 1 of Leviticus. Okay. All right, taking the skin off the animal. This is the introduction. I'm just going to go fast. Okay, they've slaughtered an animal, and they're following the Mishnah to the Mishnah's guide as to how to cut up an animal according to the sacrificial ritual. So they cut a hole that's in the tendon of the shin and the tibia and fibula. It's hung under the screen. I'm pointing on my screen. You can't see me. And this poor animal, okay, is going to be skinned. Okay, and I'm going to go fast here. They're cutting off the thing, and they're skinning the animal now. I'm just going to go fast. And skinning, okay, and the poor head of the animal has been cut off. Okay, and this is, and so there's cartoon here, and I'm sorry, these are the legs of the animal that are bundled together, and more and more and more and more and more and more and more. The head of the animal covered with the inner fat. Okay, I'm seeing all your faces. Okay, you loving this? Okay, and it's being washed, etc., 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 etc. And that, so we're getting a butcher lesson. Okay, that's what we got here, and I'm glad. I'm sure you're thankful to me for showing you that.
Yes, you vegetarians think so.
What I want to say is that, okay, so I have to be in the right mood to see this. It's been, you know, but it is fascinating. I have to say it's absolutely fascinating, and it's not something that you would if you went to an abattoir, a slaughterhouse, or you went to look. You know, many of us shop at Costco, and I don't buy anything the meat at Costco, but if you're in the grocery section, there's a whole window section where they're cutting up animals. They're cutting up all the meat, and you could see all of this going on. You don't see the animal come in because they're not doing it from scratch. But if you were to go to a butcher, I'm going to guess 20 years ago, maybe 50, certainly 150 years ago, for sure. I can recall going to butchers well into the 80s, the 1980s, where I could see this kind of activity going on, and you could probably go to Machane Yehuda or to the Shuka Carmel and see some of the. You could go there. Shuka, what? I'm sorry.
Shukalia, in the south of Tel Aviv.
Absolutely.
They were hanging those things.
You could go to this day and see this kind of activity happening. Okay, so I mean, if you eat meat, it is happening. I mean, it just you don't see it. That's all. My point is that there is what to be fascinated by this, and it's also we confront something with it. The fact that we are also kind of it elicits a strong reaction to us from us. I think it's important to note. But Ilana, go ahead. You wanted to comment on it.
I was teaching the korbanot
Yeah.
in fifth grade for about 20 years, year
Yeah.
after year after year, and it was okay. But I want to say that the purpose of certain sacrifices was to feed the Kohanim, the priests,
Correct.
like Korban Shlamim, to make peace, the one that, it wasn't just to waste it and the smoke went up, but the real material of the animals was to feed the priests.
So yes, there is a whole apparatus of a priesthood that is fed by these offerings, these gifts, and I think I'll give you just like I'm reacting to it humorously because often I'll get invited, if I get invited to someone's house or a function or whatever, and I think and it's not only me. I think it's anytime you have a guest, you want to feed, you want them to eat, right? There's a distinct pleasure that a host has when the guest eats of your meal, right? When the guest doesn't eat of your meal, you feel a certain, you're rebuffed, right? It's not, the host feels rejected. And so there's a tremendous responsibility that the priest has to eat this. The funny Israeli sketch show called Hayudim Habaim has a scene of, they satirize the Kohanim because the Kohanim get very picky about the quality of the barbecue that they get to served, and they, if it's not good enough, they don't want to eat it, and the caricature of the Kohanim already from antiquity through the rabbinic period and perhaps later on was that since these men were eating this flesh all day, they were fat, and they didn't. It wasn't like they were they didn't run and exercise. This is what they did. So obviously there are a lot of issues relating to this. Okay, so I want to just shift altogether and focus on the text. And what I want to focus on, really, I'm glad we kind of got this out of the way because this is the content of it. But as I was saying at the beginning, Exodus is filled with narrative, Leviticus not so. And the meeting point of the two books actually does elicit for us a possible narrative. And for that, I want to begin with the verses that are at the beginning of Vayikra. So we'll do that. Let me just close out of this beautiful video and turn to the first verses of Vayikra, okay? And we'll ask the question that I want to ask, which is, what's going on here? So, Vayikra el Moshe, Vayidaber Adonai elav me'ohel moed lemor. And he called to Moshe, God spoke to him from the tent of appointment, saying, Daber al bnei Yisrael v'amarta lehem adam ki akriv mikem korban l'Adonai. Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, and on and on and on and on and on and on. Now goes with the menu of the korbanot. But this is the first verse, Vayikra, he called. And the call is what's interesting to me. We may have looked at this in the past, but it's worth looking at again. Because to put it in a context and to ask the questions, well, where else do we see calls, God calling in the Torah? specifically. We may want to add, where else would we see God calling in the entire Bible? And can we compare and contrast these various different moments when God calls, specifically in the use of the word Vayikra? Now, we have, it used to be that to do this, you would just take a concordance, open up the concordance, and look for the word Vayikra and find all the mentions of Vayikra. But we can do this now online, and certainly this is what I did for this class, which is, went to my online text program and typed in Vayikra, and it gave me all the different places, 201 places in the Tanakh that the word Vayikra occurs. And then I went and looked at the first 5 books, specifically selecting where it's God that is doing the calling. God, not an angel of God, but God. Okay? So I'm going to do the trivia quiz now and ask you, in the book of Genesis, where, when, who does God call?
Gan Eden?
God calls?
In Gan Eden? Because,
Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, God calls. Okay? John, you are going to answer that?
I think God calls to Cain after the murder.
So I'm going to go to Adam first, okay? God calls Adam, and that's already chapter 3. Vayishma'u, and we know what happened, and I'm going to review all of this. And I wrote it on a table there because I want to get to the question, which is, what's the motivation here with God calling Moses at the beginning of the book? So you recall that Canaan, am I sharing? I'm not sharing here. I got to share the screen. Boom. Wrong. That where we go. It's supposed to be like this. There we go. Can you see chapter 3? So
yes.
it looks that okay. So the two of them, they ate from the. Can you see?
No.
Looking at a picture of a blue blob.
You're looking at a picture of blue blob. It's not. All right. So chapter 3, I'll put it in my alternate view here. Here, 1 second. All right. Let's put it in my Word document. It goes like this. So God calls, Vayikra Adonai Elohim El Ha'adam Vayomer Lo Ayeka. God called to the human and said to him, "Where are you?" Okay, and that I'll just fill in the blank. The blank is, the woman has given him the fruit. He ate from the fruit. They see that they are naked. They wear clothes. They put on something to cover themselves. They hide, and God says, "Where are you?" Okay. Now I have here the second instance, which is Exodus 3:4. So the word doesn't occur with the Cain and Abel story. Okay. It just I'm curious because it didn't come up. It won't come up on the screen, but it's in chapter 4, and I will just look at it here, and it says here, out of my own curiosity, it says, so God is talking to Cain. Vayomer Adonai El Cain lama chara lecha. Why are you upset? Haloim titiv. If you intend good, bear it aloft. But if you do not intend good, sin is crouching at the door. And then it says, Vayomer Cain el Hevel achiv. Cain said to Hevel his brother. It was then they were out in the field. Cain rose up against Hevel his brother, and he killed him. God said to Cain, it says Vayomer Adonai el Cain, and it doesn't say Vayikra Adonai. And I'm making a big distinction between Vayikra, calling, and Vayomer, because in our text we have Vayikra, Vayedaber. Vayikra, he calls and he speaks to. In the Cain and Abel story, he doesn't call, he just speaks to him. In the Adam story, he calls and he speaks to them. Okay? So now we go on. So I have the second appearance of calling is actually the burning bush. And I'm going to go fast here. The third instance is Sinai. There are two moments at Sinai where God calls. Moment one, where God calls Moses and says, you'll be a kingdom of priests. And moment two is when God calls Moses and say, keep them far away. Okay? And then, believe it or not, the next instance of calling is our text. Okay? And now I'm going to take you on this tour of the different contexts of this and show and ask the question, what's really going on here? And is there something that we can learn from these different contexts? Okay? I'm going to put here as a teaser 1 Samuel 3. That's the little boy Samuel who also gets called. It's a remarkably beautiful story, and we'll touch on that in a second. Here we go. So we have the incident, God and Adam. Vayikra Adonai Elohim el Adam, Vayomer Vayikra. God said to Adam, where are you? And the context before is Adam ate from the fruit. He discovers he is naked. He hides. They heard God in the garden, and the human and his wife hid themselves from God and the face of God amid the trees of the garden. And I have here my question: what are the dramatic elements here? What's going on? So I'm asking the question: in what state is God calling Adam? And Adam, what state is he in? And here it's an emotional state. He's feeling kind of uneasy. In this moment, he's guilty because he has violated what God has said that he should do. So there's the fear that he has is a natural fear of being held account and trying to it's comical if it weren't tragic. He is exercising what is a basic human behavior in a moment of guilt, which is, I want to cover up my actions. And the it's not the irony, it's not the absurdity, but it's just the fact or the truth. Before God, you can't hide. And so he tries to hide, and we see that, with irony, because we know exactly what he's doing. We are, as the audience, know more than he does. That's dramatic irony, sure. We also know what God is going to do, not only because we've read the story a million times, but because it's obvious that this was a test, and it's obvious to a child reading the story that it's not going to end well. Okay, and everyone knows that because of storytelling. Okay, and so my question really for you is, what is God's motive when it says Vayikra Adonai Elohim el Adam Vayomer lo Adeka? What is God trying to do? And I'm not sure this is a difficult question, but I just wanted to kind of put it on the graph, as it were. I want a piece of data here. We know that I'm presenting that, and you can disagree with me. It's fair. That Adam is his motivation here. His state of mind is guilt, therefore hiding. God's motivation is what? What's God's motive here?
To get him to confess. To get him
to confess, right?
Take responsibility.
Okay. Bob, go ahead.
I think God wants to connect. I think
Yeah.
it's an I-thou relationship.
So in the deepest way, God wants to be known to Adam, and I probably, I might be inclined to be a little less sophisticated, or I don't want to say trivial, but I want to say God is being God. God is being a parent. God is being the educator parent who is saying, explain to me what you did. Where are you? Where are you is not the question of location, but it's the question of where are you emotionally, where are you psychologically, where are you in the state of connectedness to me, right? Where are you with regard to the thing that I told you to do, and ultimately in terms of the boundaries that I've set for you. Are you on this side of the boundary, or are you on the other side of the boundary? Um, and then it's the eliciting of a confession. God wants to elicit from human beings responsibility. As painful as it is to say this in the present context, when Effie Shoham spoke this Shabbat about what was necessary for Israel to go on and to move beyond the context that we're in. Two things were necessary. One is, I think, Israel cannot heal until the hostages are home, and two, I don't think there can be a healing per se until there is accountability. And both of those elements are not they're blocked right now, okay, for all sorts of reasons, and we can argue a lot about that. But the point is that accountability and confession, these are necessary for anyone to move on, for any relationship to move into its next phase. You violate a relationship, if it's between partners, between friends, or whatever, however you state a relationship, however the relationship is comprised, when that relationship is ruptured, in order to repair it, there has to be some accounting. And that's what God is asking for. And Bob, you're correct in phrasing it in terms of the I-thou relationship. God, I think, is reaching to Adam and reaching over to restore that through eliciting human accountability. That's what's going on here. Okay. Well, in your comment, Bob, what about calling as a form of curiosity? We're going to see that. We're going to see that. I think with the next one. I'm going to move to Moses now. Okay, God and Adam, we got that. So now, I have to get visual here. I love these classic woodcuts. So now, here's God and Moses, and we know that this is the burning bush episode, where Moses is taking his sheep to the edge of the desert, the edge of the grazing area, and he sees this bush that's on fire, and it says, he goes down he turns aside to look, Vayikra elav Elohim mitoch hasneh, Vayomer Moshe, Moshe, Vayomer Hineni. So God saw that he turned aside, and God called him in the midst of the bush and said, Moshe, Moshe. He said, here I am. And I say here that we are in a moment. The context is the exile of Moses. He's in Midian. He's committed an act of manslaughter. He's a refugee. He's married Yitro's daughter. He's settled, and he's shepherding his father-in-law's flock. And the best I could do to describe his state of being in this moment is he's curious when he sees the bush. There is a certain tranquility that is broken. He has equilibrium in the sense that, up until now, I have a wife, I have 2 children, I have a job, I'm taking my sheep to the edge of the grazing area, I'm at the boundary, and that's the dangerous place. And so I'm leaving out, the question here, what is God's motive? When God, Vayikra leMoshe, Vayikra elav Elohim mitoch hasneh, God calls him. Why is God calling him? What is God doing here? And how do we see the call here? Or what is God's call responding to? That's, another way of asking this question.
But is it to prepare whoever you're calling to wait? I have to tell you something important. Not right away to say what I want to say, but be prepared to listen to something important that I will tell you.
Okay, very nice. So you're I think the Rashi on the first verse in Leviticus says something like that, and that's a midrashic tradition. There's a midrashic comment that Vayikra is a way of not endearment, but there's a courtesy. There's a courtesy here.
Getting attention.
It's it's the calling card. It's saying I need to speak to you. I'll tell you something. I mean, I'm going to say this, with humor, which is I understand this intuitively when now that we have cell phones and we are always accessible to everyone all the time. Okay, so occasionally I'll get a text that says something like, "I need to talk to you." Right? So when I get a text that says I need to talk to you, I get really worried. Okay, I get very scared because it feels urgent. And when I then pick up the phone and call immediately, it's something like, I have this issue. What am I supposed to do? I'm at the store and I need to know if this sign is kosher enough, that kind of thing. And I thought, somebody died or something like that. So I have made it my own practice when I'm aware of this to say, especially if for some, I will write something that says, I need to call you. I want to talk to you about this. Okay, I want to. Is it okay for me to call you? I need to talk to you about this. I don't want to leave it dangling. I'll tell you why. I mean, it's on the one hand, it's so irritating to get these kinds of things, but I just got one a couple hours ago, and I'm sure you've all received these kinds of messages. Hello, have you gotten one of those? No. Hello, hi, and like it just feels so rude, and so because what it does is it plays on your curiosity and it plays on your sense of, do I know this person? Do I not know this person? Is it a crank call? Is it this? Is it spam? Whatever. And if I answer, am I going to get all my data breached, etc. So it's not so simple. So God calling has a certain courtesy and etiquette to it, and that's what's going on there. Susie, yes, that's the problem with cell phones. Thanks. Okay, then we're going to move quickly here. So we have the chapter 3, the bush. Here's my picture. I love this picture. Tissot. And then Moses at the mountain 1. The third month after the month. So God, Moshe Allah Elai Elohim. Moses goes up to God. Vayikra elav Adonai min hahar lemor, ko tamar leveit Yaakov v'taged livnei Yisrael. Moses is coming up, and God calls him. And I'm saying that there's a state of readiness here. He wants to initiate contact. And I would say almost that there's an excitement. He wants to break through to God. And before breaking through to God, God is going to call him. And therefore, God's motive is what? I'm going to say, and I'm just going to, go quickly here. God's motive here is it's preemptive. There's a preemptive call that God makes to Moses, because the tension in that moment is Moses thinks he's ready, but God may not be ready, and God, Moses is going up the mountain, and he wants to rush into heaven. Basically, that's as it were. And God is saying, wait, hold on, this is what you need to do. I want you to tell Israel the following, this covenantal frame, Ko Tamar Leveit Yisrael. This is what you have to say. I took you out on eagle's wings. I brought you close to me. You shall be for me a treasured people and a holy nation, a kingdom of priests, etc. Okay, so that's the basic kind of frame of God's connection at the mountain, but it's not something that is going to be revealed to Moses at the top of the mountain. Moses is kind of going up. It's like, I need to go now, I need to get up there, but God calls him and it kind of stops him from going up. Okay, and then go to the next.
To make an appointment.
You have to make an appointment, absolutely. Okay, so then the second time he goes up, it goes like this at the mountain. Vayered Adonai al har Sinai. God now comes down to the mountain. Vayikra Adonai leMoshe el rosh hahar vayal Moshe. So we never read this text as closely as we should to see the choreography here. But on this reading, it's clear to me what goes on. Moses went up and God calls him. But after everything, when God is on the mountain and there is tremendous fear in the camp, because Moses has already warned them, because God told him, don't go near the mountain. If you go near the mountain, you'll die. So there's tremendous, tremendous terror here. So God is on the mountain, and Moses is still on the side of the mountain. And guess what? In the first instance, Moses is going up and God calls him. In the second instance, Moses is staying put. And it's only after God calls him that he goes up. Okay? And he's afraid to go up. He says to himself, I'm putting words in his mind, he says, I think I went too far. And God preempted me. So God was not ready for me to be there. I'll wait. I'll have to wait. Now God calls me. God calls him and basically says to him, just remind the people. The content of what God says to him at that point is, protect the people. The people are going to die if they come close to the mountain. Okay? Now, next one. Well, the next one is our case. Vayikra. And what happened? This is I found a picture of, the Mishkan. The Mishkan is filled with smoke. The context is, Vayikra el Moshe, this is Leviticus 1:1, Vayidaber Adonai elav me'ol moed lemor, called Moses, and God spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, sacrifices. He erected the courtyard all around the dwelling and put up for the screen of the courtyard gate. This is the end of the book of Exodus. Now the cloud covered the tent of appointment, and the glory of God filled the dwelling. Moshe was not able to come into the tent of appointment, for the cloud took up dwelling on it, and the glory of God filled the dwelling. Boom. There's too much God in there, okay? And he can't get in. So this is an interesting moment. It's the climax of the whole dedication or the whole construction of the Mishkan, and it's almost as I'll use this as a figure of speech. The smoke machine is over in overdrive. The smoke machine is pulling out too much smoke and it's filled up, and that was probably not supposed to happen. There is a sense that Moses wants to go in, but he can't go in. And so there's this moment of estrangement between the two. There's a moment where there's a disconnect between God and Moses. And to compensate for that, God has to call him and say, come on in, it's okay. There's smoke there, but you'll be okay. Susie, go ahead.
So there's unusual syntax in that first verse.
There's unusual syntax, yes.
You would expect it to say, Vayikra Hashem el Moshe vayedaber elav, and instead it says Vayikra el Moshe vayedaber Hashem elav.
Yes, that there are lots of things that are going on there that are difficult, that are unusual, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to resolve that in this go. But what I would say is that we have, what we tend not to do when we read the opening verse here is connected to the end of the last book. At the end of the last book, the thing, God's smoke filled the whole sanctuary, and so he can't get in. And so it reminds us of the Mount Sinai moment where God is covering the mountain, and Moses has to stay outside of the pinnacle of the mountain because he understands that it's a dangerous place. And so I want to tease out of this the tension here that is in Moses, and to a certain extent it's the tension that I'm bringing to it as a reader, which is I would like Moses to be connected. I would like Moses to have that moment of connection to God, but it's not right yet. There's something off here, and what's off is that the cloud is filling the sanctuary. He can't get there, and that there has to be a summons, and that the summons itself is the invitation. It's the courtesy. It's the way of saying you are going to come into this zone. You're going to cross this boundary, and it's going to be safe for you. Whereas up until now, it would not have been safe for you, and it certainly is not safe for anybody but you. And so that's the deep message here, is that this is a moment that God is calling him, not out of curiosity that he had at the bush, and not out of guilt, certainly, that Adam had. And if we go through my little points on the chart here that I have in my imagination, so you have Adam, who is guilty, and you have Moses, who is curious, early Moses curious, and now this is second moment of Moses is energetic and also ready but rebuffed, sort of, and now this is Moses who has to kind of wait and be patient and be held back, so that it's when God wants to talk to you, he will call you, and then you will come. So it's the human response to the divine call, basically, is what's going on here. Okay. I just for the sake of comparison, I have Samuel. So this is a picture of Samuel. And I think, did I have the verses? I may have had them. I don't have them. How about that? So, but I have them here. Do you see them here? You don't see them. Let me try.
Still the dwelling.
Still the dwelling. Hang on. Let's see if that. Oh, it's not going to do it. 1 Samuel. Let's see. How about now?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This is the opening of the book of Samuel, chapter 3. He's already a child. He's brought into the sanctuary. It's a very, very sweet story on so many levels, because you have the little boy, the tension that his mother is like, his parents are back at their home, and he is serving in the sanctuary as the steward to the high priest Eli. Va'nar Shmuel, the young Samuel was in the service of the Lord under Eli. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. It's a tragic statement. Dvar Adonai haya yakar, right? Yakar has a certain pun on it with kore and mikre, which is kore is to call, and mikre is accidental. So, at least in my ear, I hear a kind of triple pun here. All right, the prophecy was not widespread. One day, Eli was asleep in his usual place. His eyes had begun to fail, and he could barely see. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was sleeping in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was. All right, so lots and lots of layers of meaning here. There's the narrator's telling us this is a dark time in the history of Israel. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Okay. The Lord called to Samuel, Vayikra Adonai el Shmuel. And he answered, "Hey, Henny, I'm coming." And what does he think? He ran to Eli. He said, "Here I am. You called me." But he replied, "I didn't call you. Go back to sleep." So he went and lay down. And the Lord called Samuel. And Samuel rose and went to Eli and said, "Here I am. You called me, but you replied, I didn't call you, my son. Go back to sleep." Now Samuel had not experienced the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. The Lord called Samuel again, a third time. And he rose and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." Then Eli understood that the Lord was calling the boy. And Eli said to Samuel, "Go lie down. If you are called again, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" And Samuel went to his place and lay down. Vayavo Adonai vayitzav. The Lord came and stood there, as it were. Vayikra. He called, as before, Kefa'am Pam, Shmuel, Shmuel, Samuel, Samuel. Vayomer Shmuel daber. Samuel said, "Speak, ki shomea avdecha." It's such a great story. It's such a great story because you have here, two characters and the third breaking in. This is exactly what's going on, and I think, you know, back to the comment I thou, all of Vayikra, the word Vayikra is, if I want to interpret it in the most intimate and existential way, it is, or Buberian way, it's God's desire to break through. I want to pierce through. I want a line of communication. I want a frequency with you. I want you to receive me on the frequency. I mean, it's. I think that's the perfect analogy, right? I'm dialing you up on 1,000 hertz, kilohertz. Hear my call, okay? So we have Susie, Marlene, Bob. Go ahead.
So it says Shmuel, Shmuel. That reminds me of Avraham.
Absolutely. But interestingly, the word Vayikra is not what God says to Abraham. I kind of want it to be, but it's not. Sorry. Go ahead, Marlene.
I think this follows very closely on Reach Nichoach. Last Parsha, they giving these sacrifices, the pleasing to the Lord. And so there was going to be this relationship that Bob mentioned of between the people and God, and this is the calling to continue that relationship.
Yes. Okay. The Samuel story is about, it's about actually inaugurating a relationship. And it's interesting, of course, that it's happening in the Mishkan, a temple, a sanctuary precinct where lots of this goes on, that people are calling out to God, but the voice of God is rare. And the context also of Samuel is that the priesthood has quickly become a very corrupt institution. Eli, he's an old priest. He doesn't know what his sons are doing. Chofni and Pinchas are his two sons. They're malevolent, lousy people. And of course the rabbinic imagination has lots and lots of elaboration on to what extent they are so corrupt. And here, the innocence of a young child, a boy who sleeps on the floor, and the voice of God is piercing. And what is so interesting in the story is that, it takes Eli doesn't recognize what's going on until finally the third time, and that's of course a storyteller's art. The third repetition. I guess something's going on here. You better pay attention. It's probably God speaking to you. And so this is what you do. I mean, there's the irony of the story is that here's Eli, who, who on his watch, he is not getting God's call. He's the high priest. But the little kid is getting the call, and he's not. So he has to be smart enough to say to the kid, listen. And I think this is the only moment I'll give him credit, which is he has to be humble enough to know you're not on the other end of the phone here. It's not you I'm calling. I'm calling Samuel, not you. To be the high priest and to hear that God is not calling you, but calling a little kid, you have to be very humble to accept that. Bob, go ahead.
I wanted to offer another perspective on this that was stimulated by your comments. And at the very beginning, you said there's no journeying taking place in this section.
Yeah.
And I'd like to suggest it's all about spiritual journeying.
Very nice.
And I'm reflecting on that because back in medical school, when we used to do dissections of cadavers, and a lot of it was to learn the knowledge of the anatomy and physiology and surgical sorts of things. But when we would do this, it affected us very much as we dissected through different parts of the body, looked at nails, looked at the heart. Who was this person? what did this mean for them? And so, as you were speaking about the whole process of the carcasses of the animals,
Yeah,
I don't know the meaning of the heart and the liver and the kidney and the spleen, but if they represent different emotions, different feelings, different behaviors, aren't we doing the very same thing? And perhaps it was not the reason Moses couldn't go in because of the smoke and Hashem was that what were the keys to be able to enter, not only for him, but the Kohanim, but all the people of Israel. And so the korbanot become different types of keys to begin to enter. And the whole
sure.
book is a type of symbolic journey. At least that's what I'm reflecting on.
I think that's very sensitive reading here, which is it's not a stationary journey. It's not a journey of between 2 points. It's an internal journey, and it's a journey into the deeper parts of spiritual expression reflected in the sacrificial form, and that is what's going on here.
Could I say one
Indeed,
other thing? Many
yes.
years ago, we had the opportunity to visit Taiwan, one of their medical schools.
Uh-huh.
And at the Buddhist Tsuchi Medical School, the medical students would meet the families of people who had donated their bodies for dissection. And they had very moving spiritual ceremonies as people went through anatomy and learning that to really develop a sense of humanity and
Sure.
connection with the people they were going to care for. So
Interesting.
I think this ceremony, if it's pitched in a different way, goes beyond the mechanics, but to these deeper things you're talking about.
Indeed, indeed. Right, and Susie posted that the Nar is an apprentice also. That could be part of it. Well, that brings us to the end of our time together for today, and of course we're going to be off for a few weeks for Pesach. I hope everyone has a beautiful Pesach. Well, I'm working on some material to send out some other supplements. We already put out the supplement in the Hilton Nelson Guide. I included my annual Jeopardy quiz, which was, I think, very hard this year. I made it very difficult. I included also some pictures, some pieces of art by the artist Tissot on these stories. And I would love to hear what you think of them, and if they help you tell the story in a different way this year at the Seder. So, looking forward to hearing all about it, and I'll be in touch in some way, some form, either real. You'll hear my messages on the phone, and who knows, we may put a video up too. So.
You will call to us, right?
I will call. I will call you. I will call Vayikra because I
Give
seek
us the
it.
good news about the
I will
Israel, your
the
family.
I will seek the the intimate relationship, the closeness. That's what the calling is about. The courtesy of it, the love of it.
Right,
All
right.
right.
Aziz and Pesach to all.
Amen. To you also. All the best.
חג
Chag
שמח,
Sameach, Chag Sameach to
נסיעה
you.
טובה,
And
נסיעה
Toda Rabah.
טובה.
Look forward to
Yes,
seeing you
yes.
all soon. Take care.
ולמזל טוב, כן?
Toda Rabah. When it happens, we'll just be ready. Okay. Thank you all. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.